Welcome to this episode of Dialogues. My name is Jeff Faux. I'm the Director of Sacred Arts at First Presbyterian Church in Bonita Springs, and I am thrilled to introduce you to Randy and Lori Thomas. You may not recognize them unless you attend our Saturday evening CenterPoint Praise service, where they lead music about half the time. Otherwise, they are busy elsewhere on Sunday mornings, and you don't get to see them unless you come on Saturdays. So what a great way to be introduced to these great Christian artists, and I think you're going to enjoy what you find out about them. Now, the first thing everyone wants to talk about is this rumor that you've won a Grammy Award. Now, was it for your work at CenterPoint Praise?
It was not, surprisingly. I was fortunate to be the co-writer on a song called Butterfly Kisses, and Lori and I were able to go to New York City, and at that time we had spent so much time in the Christian music field being nominated for awards for which we did not win, that we went to the Grammys thinking it will be just an honor to be nominated and it'll be fun to go and not win. And so we were very shocked when it won, because it was in the category of Country Song of the Year, and that was a wonderful time.
Yeah. Well, how many nominations have you had?
Well, for Grammys, I think that was only the second. I think the first one was for a record cover for Sweet Comfort Band.
Okay. Now, what we plan on doing is having a higher ground episode where we can focus on that song a bit more and have you sing it for us. So we're looking forward to doing that in the near future. So look out for that. Now, what brought you both to Fort Myers?
You don't want to say?
Well, we were living in Nashville, raising our kids, and thought that we would end up being there forever. And we got a call here in Fort Myers to Westminster Presbyterian Church for Randy to be the worship director. And so we came to see what it was all about, and it was clear that the Lord was leading us here. And it's been a great move.
So what's gotten you both involved in worship leadership?
There was a time there, it was about 2002, where we got involved in a church plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee. And we had been involved in a church in Franklin, Tennessee. All of this is just south of Nashville. And continuing south, there was this church plant that involved so many 20-somethings, and we had lots of young couples with children, and was a wonderful place to plant a church. And so Lori and I first began being worship leaders. It was an interesting return to ministry I had done back in the 70s and 80s, and we thought, well, let's do music at a church rather than tour around. And it was a wonderful experience. And after doing that for about 4 years, when we got the call to come to Fort Myers, it was. We knew that if we were to leave Nashville and come to Fort Myers, it would be a drastic change. Mm. There's a friend of mine in Nashville, Nate Larkin, who suggested that we go, and he said, because in Nashville, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a worship leader. Mm. And I asked him, why would you swing a dead cat? But he had said, your talents will be more rare in Fort Myers than they are in Nashville, which is very true. There's just so much talent in Nashville, which is a wonderful thing. But it's great to come to a place where there is a great need for some musical leadership and spiritual leadership. And it started a new chapter for us where we began to work much more closely together.
So then in this, you work as a team in worship leadership. Mm-hmm. So Lori, what's your role on the team?
I mainly listen to him. I play piano, mm-hmm. and I sing, and that's...
And you work in an advisory role. We've had some time in the church where quite often, every week, I will say, what songs would I not think of? And she'll think of some worship song that she'll say, oh, I can't wait to sing this again. And so there's creative input, and there's a lot of things that you do that have to do with the screens and the technology. And I've had to learn things that have to do with video cameras and those sort of things. And so we've done a lot of things as a team.
So what else do you do besides worship at Westminster?
There's quite a few things. We have a new grandbaby, Emmeline, who lives quite nearby. Our daughter was smart enough to buy a house just around the corner from where we live, so that's a new adventure. But other than doing music at Westminster, we do music. We have played with a band here in town called Alter Ego, and then after we'd been playing with them for some years, the drummer said, you guys would be great as a duo. And in 2015, we launched Randy and Lori. We have, the website is randyandlori.com, using our real names. And we became sort of a duo now that we perform in country clubs. And it's something I've never seen before. I imagine it's not particular just to Fort Myers and to Naples, but there is quite a wonderful sort of an underground country club scene here where there are food and beverage directors that are charged with putting together a dinner. And so there's this interesting thing that we do where we do dinner music, and I call it music to be ignored by. And we'll often play music very quietly while people have dinner. Then there's a switch where we will continue to do music, but when they're finished with dinner, it'll enter into the dancing party atmosphere. And that's one of our new interesting sidelines.
Excellent. Well, so Randy and Lori, that makes me want to ask, and I'm going to ask Lori, how did you guys meet?
We met at church. I was singing with another group, and we came to San Bernardino Community Church to sing there. And one of the guys in our band said, hey, the guy who wrote the song that we're going to sing is here, and he's going to play with us. And I'm like, what? Okay, that's embarrassing. But it was Randy. And so we... that's kind of how we met.
Yeah.
Just through music and church.
So you met in Southern California.
We did.
What got you to Tennessee?
We had both been raised in California, and we knew that we wanted something better for our kids. And at the time, Randy was signed with Word Records. He was traveling with a band called Allies. And we actually got... there were several sources that kept asking us to move to Nashville. And so we did, and we loved it, raised our kids there. It was wonderful.
So it sounds like it was a different culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you want to talk about that? How different was that?
It was a culture shock. There was a lot of fun. There was when we first moved to Nashville, when you need to call people to have them come turn on your utilities and things of that sort. Having grown up in California, I was used to giving people directions. So I would call someone and they're coming to turn on our water or something, and I would try to tell them which street to take and where to turn, and they would always interrupt me and just say, "Where are you at?" And I actually had one of these utility people, I was trying to give him directions, and he interrupted me with, "Where are you at?" And he said, "Are you in the Yeller House?" And I said, "Yes, we're in the Yeller House." And he showed up. And so that's when I learned that, Franklin at that time was small enough that when somebody bought the Yellow House, there was talk around town. Somebody bought the Yeller House. And my partner, Bob, who I'd written Butterfly Kisses with, had even more of a problem where the house that he had purchased had belonged to someone named Melvin Spain, So he spent the next 5 years with people, where anyone that he called, they would say, "Where are you at?" And he would give them the address, and they would say, "Oh, you mean Melvin Spain's house?" And so,
Yeah.
but that was there's a very sweet country meets hipster culture in the Nashville area, and there's some of the Bible Belt influence. There's just such a wonderful convergence. We were the foreigners, really, but you have people like us were coming in, and you have the people who were there to begin with, and they were very welcoming because they easily could have said, "We're tired of you Yankees," but it's a wonderful, wonderful place to live. We still love Nashville, and we thought we would never find any place that we could love as well, but we do love it here.
So talk to me about some of the people that have recorded some of your music.
I don't have the resume in front of me, but there was Hank Williams Jr. was an interesting. There was a Colin Ray. There was Peebo Bryson. Butterfly Kisses was not only recorded by Bob Carlyle, it was recorded by the Rabin brothers.
And Jeff
Carson and Cliff Richard, who is like the Elvis of England. He's quite a big deal there. And there are many others. There's Lila McCann recorded a song of mine. There's a list now that I've forgotten. There's
Dolly Parton.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Dolly Parton took a song of ours to #1.
What song was that?
That's Why'd You Come In Here Looking Like That?
So talk to me about that. Are you the writer of that song?
It's with Bob Carlyle, and Bob showed up one day. This is the precursor to Butterfly Kisses. It was somewhere around 1986. He showed up and he said, "Do you think you could write country with me?" Because we had written different things in Christian music, but it was a whole new thing to write country music. And I sort of thought back on my influences go back to classic country of the 50s and 60s, and I said, "Yeah, I think I can do that." And he had this germ of an idea, "Why'd you come in here looking like that?" And I remember writing the lyrics. I was on an airplane flight to go do an Allies tour. And I can remember thinking, what business do I have, being a Christian rock and roller from Southern California, writing country lyrics? And I was very glad to be exonerated when Dolly Parton sang the song, and she kept all of our lyrics verbatim. And Bob, having grown up in Southern California, also, when he sang the demo, there's a very slight country twist to saying, it's not "Why'd you come in here," it's "Why'd you come in here?" And he's saying, "Why'd you come in here?" And Dolly picked up on that. There's a little "here" in it that she definitely knows how to pull off. And she did it on every major, all the Letterman and all of the major media outlets. She worked that song and took it to #1, and that probably is very influential in why we talked about perhaps we need to move to Nashville.
Right.
So you've been deeply involved in both sacred and secular music. So what is the dividing line? How do does that work for you?
When I was young, there had always been sort of this, Christian voices that had said to me that if you ever stop doing Christian music and you go off into secular music, then all the devil worshipers are going to get a hold of you, and they're going to drag you down to hell, and they're going to shoot drugs in your eyeballs. And so one of my first experiences was I went to audition for Shania Twain, and she's a very nice lady, and her husband Mutt Lang, who was a big hero of mine as a record producer. When I met them, they were just not horrible people, and the way that they treated me was not horrible. It was just in the music business. So I have often marveled at how a lot of the things that I was told when I was young turned out not to be true, where there unfortunately sometimes is a business behind Christian music, and there is a business behind secular music, and there is not a clear-cut line. For instance, with Butterfly Kisses, is that a Christian song or is it a secular song? And I think it blurs the line. Mm-hmm. It is both. Yeah. It is a song written by Christians. It is a song about loving your daughter. It was released as a country song. You know, I like it when things spill over from one category mm-hmm. into another, and just like, you know, I love it when someone who is able to do Christian music is able to reach out into the general market, and vice versa. I like it when someone in the general market who is a Christian lets their light shine. So I would say, I don't know where the line is. I think it's great when we blur that line.
So then when you perform as Randy and Lori, what does your song list look like?
Our song list is dictated by those we listen to somewhat, as far as Randy and Lori, when we are playing a dinner dance, and if someone were to request a certain song, we just say, well, we've got to add that. We kept having people ask for it. Now we've gotten to the point where I think that generally we've done some country clubs lately where no one has requested anything, because it seems as though our song list is already, you know, sort of meeting the demand. They're always saying, I wish they would do an Elvis song, and then we'll do an Elvis song, then they're happy. And someone may say, you know, I wish Lori would sing a ballad. She sings a ballad, then they're happy. And, or I wish there was, you know, one of those old-time rock and roll songs, and we do it and they're happy. So I think our song list has grown to the point now where it's custom made for an audience.
Now, I first ran into Lori when she auditioned for the Master Singers in Fort Myers.
Yes.
And I said, wow, this girl can sing. And then you came along and I let you in because I didn't want to lose Lori. So
I'm
Lori,
glad you admit the truth.
So Lori, what kind of training have you had?
Actually, not much. My mother was a singer, and there were 4 girls in our family. And so I think Randy put it succinctly. The other night, someone asked me if I was classically trained, and I said no. And then he said, well, you were trained by a classical singer. And so that's, yeah.
So Randy, how did you get started?
How did I get started?
In singing and doing music?
I just started in garage bands, but before we move on to some of those things, I wanted to say that what's really great for my humility is often when we play in country clubs, people come up to us and they look at Lori and they say, oh, you were wonderful. You're just fabulous. They're coming up with all these adjectives. And then they look at me and they say, oh, you were good too. So it keeps me humble.
Good. Well, are there lessons like that you've learned along the way in your career that's been divided between sacred music, secular music, and the travel? And
I think, the lessons, there are many, many lessons, but it's interesting to me that I started out in garage bands, and we just learned how to play our instruments, and we came up through the ranks. And I think there's a lot that happens in the music business, which is a bit like the old system where you sort of apprentice, you know, where you have to first, you know, you just are the janitor, and then you work your way up to an assistant, and then you work your way up to first chair. So most of what I've been through in music has always been, for instance, when I was in high school, you know, you start out being last chair trombone, and through dogged persistent, I became first chair. And so a lot of that helped me later, as I later got into a position where I play guitar in a band, but I'm the only guitarist in the band. How are you going to continue to excel and move upward. And I think a lot of those early experiences enabled me to continue to strive to get to another level of excellence.
So one more question. What do you want to be remembered for?
I would like to be remembered for being faithful. I mean, because God has been faithful to me. It's important to me that I've been faithful in my marriage, in my church, in my to do what God has called me to do. And I'd like to jokingly say, if butterfly kisses would be the thing I'm known for when I'm dead, then I can live with that.
Well, thank you, Randy and Lori, for joining me on this. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dialogues, and I invite you to get to know Randy and Lori better a couple of ways. Come to one of our Saturday services during season. You can check them out on the internet at, give the right address,
randyandlori.com.
randyandlori.com, and look for some of the recordings and look for their upcoming Higher Grounds episode. Thanks for joining us.